And welcome to your first XCode programming tutorial. This is a revision of the original introduction, because I did do one already, but this is a bit of an update to it. So I'm going to be showing you everything you need to know to get started with iOS app development and get you on your way to developing your first app. So I'm starting on the Apple developer website, and the link will be in the description. It's just developer.apple.com. And everything you need to know about iOS development you can find here pretty much. Sometimes it's a bit complex, but it's a pretty good resource. They've got a lot of information. If you click on the resources tab, and that's where we're going to start, you can see all the information to do with app development. It's a bit different in the moment because of iOS 7's just been announced. I'm recording this right after WWDC. And you can become an iOS member and get access to the iOS developer program. So let me talk about that first. Once you've created your app, which I'm going to show you how to do in a moment, you might want to publish it, or you might want to run it on your own iPhone or iPad or any other Apple device. To do this, you're going to need to be a member of the iOS developer program, and that's costing you $99 a year. And let me tell you exactly what it gives you access to, because, I mean, yes, it gives you access to development, testing, and distribution, but it gives you access to a bit more. So if you look at what they're advertising development, testing, distribution. You can develop your app without being an Apple developer. To test your device on real devices, you need to be an Apple developer unless you jailbreak the device, and then it's a lot more complex and it's not worthwhile. And to distribute your apps to the App Store, there's no other way to do it without being an Apple developer. The other thing it gives you access to, and something that I very much like, is that it gives you access to a whole lot of resources. It gives you access to all the documentation, sample code, gives you access to videos, Apple tutorials, which are really good. Sometimes they can be a bit complex, but once you're developing complex applications, they can be very useful. And it's $99 a year. That comes to like 30 cents a day. It's not much, and it gives you everything you need, really. And then, you know, you could publish an app today that makes more than $99 a year. It's not difficult. So, to do that, you just click Enroll Now. Go to Apple developer.apple.com/program/start/standard, or just go to developer.apple.com/program/iOS, and it's also down the bottom of the developer.apple.com page. I'll put all these links in the description. And then click Enroll Now and continue, and then you need an Apple ID, which is obviously free, and you've probably got one. That's just your email address and password when you download apps and things. So that's how you become an Apple developer. Once you become an Apple developer, you get access to the Member Center. You get access to a whole lot of great stuff. iTunes Connect, so you can track your app sales and upload apps. You don't need to worry about that too much. This is the Member Center. You've got the Dev Centers, so the developer centers, all the distribution, the support, which is useful, and certificates, identifiers, and profiles. If you don't know what they are all your... Pretty much when you're testing your app and publishing it, you need to download certificates and provisioning profiles. You need to register your device. So you need a whole lot of different information. And I'll do a tutorial later on about that. You don't need that at this stage, though. Developer support's good. I forgot to mention this. For $99 a year, you can contact Apple twice in a year and get support on anything. You can send them your code. I've used it once or twice, and you pretty much email them with the problem. If they can't work it out via email, they'll give you access to an FTP server. You can upload your app, and they'll look through it, find the bug, and fix it up for you. And they always do. They otherwise don't take off one of the two developer help support tickets. As you can see, here's the videos. You get access to WWDC videos, and that's their big worldwide developer conference, and that's very useful. You can't actually attend WWDC if you're not an Apple developer, so again, another bonus. So let's start actually looking into developing your apps. So the compiler, the program that turns your Objective-C code into code that the iPhone can read, is XCode. For programming iOS, you use Objective-C pretty much all the time. There might be, games you might use Unity or something, but pretty much you use Objective-C, which is a mix of... It's derived from C, and it's a mix of C, C++, and C#. It's a really good language. It's quite easy to pick up. I've picked it up. And you can teach yourself it quite easily. That's what these tutorials hope to do. And I'll start with the basics and build up to the more complex stuff. So, Xcode's available from the Apple developer website. It's also available from the Mac App Store. I think it's free. It used to be like $5, but I think they made it free now. And it's just called Xcode. And when you get Xcode, you get access to a few things. You get Xcode and iOS simulator, instruments, which is complex. I can show you actually. Instruments, iOS simulator, printer simulator, accessibility inspector, file merge, and application loader. Application loader is used to upload your apps to the App Store, but you can actually do that through Xcode. So once you've got Xcode, you don't need to download anything else. I mean, you can if you want to, but that's all you need. And most of the best apps are developed just on Xcode. If you go through the App Store, other than games, I can guarantee that at least 90% of all apps will have been developed solely on Xcode. And even if you develop an app on a different program, it has to go through Xcode to go to the App Store. So let's open up Xcode now, and let me open up the Welcome to Xcode. And that's the first window you're going to get. So I'll just quit this so that you can see exactly what you'll see. And so Welcome to Xcode, you'll have the last open project. You'll get 4 buttons: create a new project, connect to a repository, learn more about Xcode, so all their resources and references, and go to the Apple Developer Portal. And the repositories, if you want to get repository, for example, and source control, don't worry about that, that's all complex. But just start by creating a new Xcode project. And we're going to do a single view application. And let me walk you through quickly what all of these are. I'm going to try and be a bit quicker now, because the rest of this I'll go through every other tutorial. But there's master detail, that's only for iPad, and that is a split view look. So there might be, for example, the mail app. If you got it in landscape mode, you've got this table cell-like view of rows on the left, and then you got this main view area on the right. So that's a master detail. OpenGL game, that's just a game essentially with animations, physics effects, all of that sort of stuff. We won't be going through that much. Page-based application, they're kind of useful, but they're hard to use, and I haven't done a tutorial on them yet, so I'd wait until I've done the tutorial before you start going and looking into those. Can't hurt to look at them though, so go ahead and click on it and create an app and see what you get. It's just like an iBooks book pretty much, and it has that sort of flip page-based look, and I mean the icon to it gives it away a lot. So then I'm going to skip single view and tabbed for the moment, because those are the two most important ones that I'll be showing you in about 20 seconds. Utility, that's essentially a single view, except it's got 2 views, so it's a blank view. So just, a wide area that you can drag buttons and switches and whatever you want into. And then it's got a button at the top that says something like next view, and you click on it, it takes you to another blank view where you can drag buttons and switches and everything. And then a back button that takes you back to the original view. That's all that is, and you don't need that. You can, in Xcode tutorial 2, I cover how to do switching views, and it takes about 3 lines of code, so you don't need to do this utility application, because it just makes your life more difficult. Empty application has absolutely nothing, and then you need to, add frameworks and everything else by yourself. You'll never use that at this stage anyway. Okay, so let's actually look at tabbed first, because we're going to do a single view in this tutorial. Tabbed application, again, the icon shows you pretty much, just focus on that black part of the icon, where you can see there's 2 tabs, and if you go into the App Store app, for example, the podcast app, iTunes app, these are all the built-in apps, that you can see a tab bar. Those are custom tab bars. You'll notice they don't look much like that. Where you'll see a real Apple tab bar is if you open up the phone app on your iPhone or iPad, or the messages app. No, not the messages. Really the phone app for iPhone. I don't quite know an equivalent for iPad. I think FaceTime on the iPad doesn't have a custom one, so you can try that. And that creates by default 2 tabs. I'll do a tutorial on how to add more. And that's really useful for a lot of things. You'll work out when you need them and when you don't. But I do advise looking at those, doing some research on those, because you will be using them. I recommend that you click through tabbed, page-based, maybe utility, and up to you whether you want to look at master detail. And just create a project, which I'm about to show you how to do with single view, and you just have a look at it, click run, see what you think of it, see how it'll work, so you get a better idea. That's the best way to learn how to do these sort of things. So, next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a single view application. So, to create a single view application, you can either double click or click on single view application, then click next. And then this is what you're going to have. Let me delete. You won't actually have these filled in. I filled those in. You're going to have 3 fields you'll need to fill in and a few checkboxes and everything else. The product name, organization name, and company identifier. Company identifier and organization you only need to do once. So organization name, that can just be your name. It can be your company name. It can be anything. Company identifier is what you're going to have before your bundle identifier. When you're uploading apps to the App Store, you're going to need a bundle identifier as well as when you're testing on the device, and it'll be the company identifier.theappname.com. It's not a real URL that you can type into a search browser, a web browser, but it is the bundle identifier. So think about what that's going to be. I just did apps. You can do whatever you want. Doesn't have to be of any relevance, really. Class prefix, don't do anything there. Just leave that, I would advise. Up to you. Devices. So now we're up to the stuff that's just for this device, for this app. So what's the app name going to be? And I'm just going to call my app. You can call it whatever you want. You might want to call it Quiz. You might want to call it Angry Birds. Whatever you want. Devices. Those are the devices the app will run on. You can have it run only on iPhone, only on iPad, or you can run it on both. Auto universal, just for the purpose of this. Now, make sure unit tests are included. Tick that box. Make sure automatic reference counting is selected. That's really important, those two. Storyboard is up to you. There's 2 sort of views. When you're creating an app, you've got 3 things. You've got a .h file, .m file, and .nib for each view. And a view is pretty much a screen, a slide, whatever you want to call it. A window. And storyboards are just a different way of interacting with it. We're just going to be using nibs. It's up to you. They're not much more complex. They're just a bit different. They're a bit newer. I haven't got used to them yet, so I just don't use them, and it makes very little difference. With iOS 7, you now have to use them, so I will do a tutorial on how to use storyboards, but for this introduction, I don't think it's necessary. So then just choose where you want to save your project and click Create. And you've now got access to your XCode interface, and let's go through the summary first. Click on this blue, big, thick tab. And you'll see you're in the Summary tab, and you've got your bundle identifier, you got your version, keep that as 1. Deployment target's the first thing you need to look at. That's will it run on iOS 7, iOS 6, iOS 5, iOS 4. The lowest you can do with the new version of Xcode is 4.3. I'm going to put mine to 5, then you don't have any deprecation issues, which I'll explain later. And that's essentially why Apple's, got rid of one way of changing a label's text and created a new way that only works in iOS 6, so it's better to have it as iOS 5 and run the old way. I'll leave these 2 fields. The supported interface orientations are portrait, upside down, landscape, left, landscape, right. By default, it's going to select all of them, but upside down. The reason they don't select upside down is because Apple doesn't want the app to interrupt other system functions, such as phone calls. So if you get a phone call, the phone app doesn't work upside down because the microphone and the speaker would be upside down. So Apple don't want you working your apps upside down. They're not going to reject the app from the App Store, though. When you upload your app to the App Store, it's got to be reviewed before it gets published, and they've got quite thorough review guidelines. But you can have it upside down. So I'm going to do portrait up and upside down. I'm not going to do landscape because that's a bit more complex. Status bar, that's the bar at the top of an iPhone screen with the clock, your signal strength for Wi-Fi and cellular and whatever. So we're just going to keep ours at default 1. We can change the color if you wanted. So tinting, custom color, and then we can choose a color. So let's make ours bright green. If we run the app now, we'll run in a moment actually. App icons, the icons, if you hover over it, you can see the sizes that are required. So for the iPhone with Retina, it's 114 by 114 pixels in size. Pre-rendered means you don't get that sort of bevel, the shiny reflection halfway through, because Apple thinks that it already includes the gloss, but it actually doesn't, and a lot of apps don't use the gloss, so that's how you get rid of it. Then you can do all the same things for iPad. Info, this is all the information to do with your apps. You don't really need to go there. Build settings, again, you don't need to look there until you're developing and testing your apps, distributing and testing your apps, I should say. Build rules, let's quickly look at that you don't need. Build phases, you're going to need a couple of things here. Copy bundle resources, so there's all the images in particular that you need. So if you need to add an image, right-click in this side hierarchy view and click Add Files. Click Copy Items into Destinations Group folder if needed. and then find your picture or whatever and add it in. And then by default, it automatically goes into build phase, it's copy bundle resources. If for some reason it hasn't though, then you'll need to manually add it. That might just be computers frozen or whatever. Link binary with libraries, they're libraries. And so, for example, if you want to include maps in your app, you need to import the maps library. For most things you don't. If we go into the object library for iPhone in a moment, you'll see, for buttons, they're just part of UI kit, which is by default imported. If you delete UI kit, your app's gonna crash. You need all of these three. And then if you want in-app purchases, so where you can, buy new levels to games, you need store kit. For ads, I think you need an ad framework and iAd. So there's a few frameworks you'll need along the way, but follow along with the tutorials and I'll show you how to do them. To add a framework, you click the arrow next to link binary with libraries to drop it down so you can see them all. And then you click plus, and then you just start searching, or you can scroll through them all manually. If you got a custom library you need to import, just click add other, and then find it in your Finder browser. Your AppDelegate. So I've done a tutorial on that. It's, I think, tutorial 8. I can't remember if I have, maybe 9 or 10. And the AppDelegate's what sends your app to the iPhone. So your app has, let's call your app, and then there's iPhone. So app has to talk to iPhone, and I don't mean at a code level, I mean at, when the app quits, the app might need to save some data. So the AppDelegate's what's doing the communication. It's the delegate for your app, essentially. That took me a while to understand too, so I do suggest you watch that tutorial. And then we've got the view controller. That's where it gets important. To add a view controller, let me start with that. You just right-click on your folder, and click New File, and then Objective-C class, subclass of UI view controller, and then you can call it whatever you want. And then you can make it iPad, and you do want a nib for user interface. I won't create one though. In here, this is your .h file, so if you got any variables like numbers or text that you want to change throughout the app, you put them here. If you got a button that you want to interact with, you need to declare it here, which I'll show you how to do in a later tutorial, but I'll quickly summarize it here. Then in your viewcontroller.m, you put the majority of your code. So all the code, if you want to do something, you might want to get rid of the status bar at the top of the screen programmatically. So then you do this code. So when the view did load, that's when this view loads. Network activity indicator visible equals yes. And if I ran that, you'd see that little spinning disk at the top in the status bar. Usually when you're trying to load something in the internet, that spins. Well, this is going to make it spin too. So that's some code you can add. And then we get the nib, and that's where you'll start really seeing what a real app is, how a real app's created. So I'm going to make the background white, and you can just, look around. If I click on the view, I've got all these different options. I might want it to be a 3.5 iPhone 4 screen. You can add switches. You can just drag it in. You'll probably be on this by default. Click this little cube, the objects inspector, and then you can go either onto this view or the cube collection view, and then you can just drag elements in. They're all the iPhone elements. You can't really use any others. You can do custom buttons, so I could have a button and then set it to be custom and then set a background image. So I imported an image before called basketball, so I start typing, it's going to give me the rest of the name. That's now a button. I can click on it and something can happen. If I want something to happen when I click on it, up here you've got this dual editor controls section, and that's the standard editor where you can just see one thing. If you want to see more than one thing, open up this dual AS editor. It's called the assistant editor, so you can have two things open at once. You could have the M&H file, you could have the AppDelegate in the file, you can have anything you want really. You can add more, you can click this plus button here, and you can add as many as you want really, I think. And then to change what's shown here, so if it's viewcontroller.h by default and I want it to be viewcontroller.m, I just up here go viewcontroller.m. I want it to be h actually. And if I want to manually select one, I can go through that by clicking on this little suit. I don't know why it's a suit. So now I want something to happen when the button's selected, so I'm going to add a curly bracket after this at interface line, press enter, and it's going to automatically insert another one. And I'm going to right click or control click on Mac mouse, and drag it, and you'll see this blue line appear. I'm going to let go under the curly bracket and change the connection to be an action. And the action is going to be touch up inside, and that means the user has clicked the button and then they've let go. You'll notice on a lot of apps, if you click something, it's not actually going to do anything until you let go again. If you want it to as soon as the user even touches the button you want it to do the action, just touch down. And we'll this button pressed. And make sure there's no spaces. And this is what you call camel case, and let me show you that. That's when if you got 2 words, but you can't do spaces, and you often do that for variables, you make the second word capital, button pressed again, whatever you want. For views, you always capitalize the first letter, that's your standard, but for anything else, you make the first word lowercase to start with, and then the next word capital first letter. And then we go, that's an action, and if I go into my .m file now and back into my single editor, I can see an action's being created, and if I want to do something when the button is pressed, I do it here. To action. And as you'll see, it's gone green. That means that I have done these 2 slashes, and which essentially means it's a comment. That's for my benefit only. Xcode's going to ignore that, so it's not going to come up with an error. If I just typed do action here, it's going to give me an error. You know, what's wrong with you? Why have you typed this weird code? And I can click this little red exclamation mark to see what the error is. Use of undeclared identifier action. So action doesn't exist. What the hell is action? Is this what it's saying? So that's a comment, and it'll appear in green by default. You can do multi-line comments by doing / asterisk and then pressing enter a few times, and then doing asterisk / to close it, and then you can do a few lines inside that. And then you've also got the iPad view controller. If we run the app now let's run it in the iPhone simulator, and you'll see you got a few choices. You can't do an iOS device unless you're an Apple developer. And we click run. It'll give you a status here, and until your build succeeded. If you get errors, find the error. And I've done a thing on debugging. As you can see, it went green as we said. And as you can see, this network activity indicator is spinning as we set it to. Haven't done anything else. There's our button and our switch. And yeah, that's the basics of Xcode. That's your starting tutorial. If you got any questions, feel free to message me, or go to the 99 Cents App Development website and visit the Contact Us Get in Touch page, 99centsappdevelopment.com. There's a lot of great resources there too. Be sure to subscribe and like this video, and we'll see you next time for our first app.